Carine, before we get into the interview, I do want to issue a warning to folks at home that some of the details naturally, because of the nature of what we're talking about, are going to be disturbing. And I was reading in the report that you found evidence of ethnic cleansing, rape as a weapon of war, of potential genocide. Describe to us, if you can, what exactly you found in the research.
Okay. Thank you, Natasha. What we found is that since the start of the war in Tigray in November 2020, authorities in Western Tigray zone, as well as officials and security forces from Ethiopia's Amhara region, targeted Tigrayan civilians in brutal ethnic cleansing campaign amounting to crimes against humanity and war crimes, at times with the acquiescence and possible participation of the Ethiopian federal forces. Hundreds of thousands of Tigrayans have been forcibly removed from Western Tigray in a textbook example of an ethnic cleansing campaign. The campaign, it's important to highlight that the campaign has been hidden from the world, both because of deliberate attempts by federal and regional authorities to block access to independent humanitarian human rights media groups and to communities seeking to flee, but also key actors who have no clear insights of the magnitude of the suffering and needs of communities all around. And these abuses occurred in several critical phases that we documented during our research and that are outlined in the report. There are 4 critical phases. It's important to highlight as well that Western Tigray has been the site of decades-long simmering tensions and rights abuses over boundaries and identity issues that had been previously violently suppressed by the Tigrayan regional authorities. The takeover of the zone by Amhara regional authorities in November 2020 represents a violent reversal of changes to Ethiopia's contested internal boundaries and now remains a core issue at the heart of the ongoing conflict. But vulnerable communities who remain in Western Tigray cannot be held hostage to territorial arguments whose resolution could be long and difficult, hence our report and our different calls. And there are immediate protection concerns for vulnerable communities that remain, including the hundreds at what we estimate to be thousands of those in detention. I would like to say that our findings are particularly important because while there have been reports of fighting and abuses elsewhere, Western Tigray has received very little attention in both public and private discussions and in reporting.
So, Carine, let me jump in on that point, because that is an unbelievably excellent summary of what you found in the report and what has been happening in the region. But I did also want to use this opportunity to get your insights into the lack of reporting on this story. Because this war has been going on, as you said, since November of 2020. And it's uncomfortable to make comparisons, but the war in Ukraine has been going on for 6 weeks. And yet the degree of coverage and the degree of interest by the international community is night and day. Why do you think that is?
I think war crimes and crimes against humanity are serious crimes, regardless of where they occur. In Ethiopia, we're looking at 17-month-long conflict. We've documented over a year a brutal ethnic cleansing campaign amounting to crimes against humanity, as I said. The lack of coverage, in our view, is sometimes due to competing interests as well, and how the media might be inclined to cover some crises more than others. But what we would like to see, ultimately, is a more coordinated, more robust actions on our cause. Ethiopia presents a set of serious challenges. When we look at the lack of coverage, we have to remember that there's been a serious lack of access, including for humanitarian groups, communication restrictions, and massive displacement. What makes it difficult in Ethiopia, unlike in Ukraine, is the deliberate, again, attempts to obscure the flow of information and documentation of abuses in real time, which we have on Ukraine. We don't have it on Western Tigray. And again, we also, Ethiopia being an African country, we also calling for African leaders who have been quite outspoken on Ukraine to show the same vigor and determination on crises like the one we see in Ethiopia, as well as other places in the continent.
Those who are outside of the African continent, those who are outside of roles of power. What can be done to assist the people, the civilians who are suffering in the midst of the Ethiopian war?
We've made we believe that the gravity of the crimes we document warrants a referral to an international justice mechanism to prosecute perpetrators of war crimes and crimes against humanity. That's why we are calling on the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia, which has just begun its work to consider referring the situation in Western Tigray to such a mechanism. We're also calling on the African Commission on Human and People's Rights that's carrying out an investigation in Tigray. We need global solidarity. We need people to be more, and especially leaders, to be more targeted in how they respond to the crisis. We've called for the UN Security Council to raise Ethiopia on its regular agenda. We've called on the African Union Peace and Security Council to hold an extraordinary session on Ethiopia. We've made very targeted calls on allowing the deployment based on a consensual agreement with the Ethiopian federal government, the deployment of an African Union-led international peacekeeping deployment in Western Tigray, given the pressing humanitarian and human rights needs.
Okay. Carine, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for doing this report, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you for having me.
Carine Nantulya is the Africa Advocacy Director at the Africa Division for Human Rights Watch.